In today's episode, I speak to Liz and Jason Medwid about the need to find your creative outlet and how to make it successful. Jason originally started his own podcast to get his music out there, and it has now morphed into the stories of a fictional town complete with its own newscast. Liz and Jason have captured the innocence of the child and combined it with a strong sense of purpose and a demonstration of integrity. They believe that all creative projects need a mission and organisation. Take a listen to see what they mean. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today we have two guests, Liz and Jason Medwid. Hi guys.
Hi there. Thank you very much for having us on.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
This is going to be interesting having the two of you on as we try to figure out who's saying what when. So I'm sure the audience won't mind if we talk over each other on occasion. We'll just see how things go. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. But before we get going, can one of you let us know who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Jason Medwid. I'm co-host of a podcast called the Smile Syndicate Music Hour with my wife, Liz. She's known as Miss Elizabeth on the show. It's a twice-weekly podcast where we do comedy segments and original music. So it's all set in a fictional town. So we tell stories about our town. We do a fake newscast from the town. We have a community message board. We have lots of different kinds of comedy segments. It's like a variety show. And it's all just really light, silly, fun kind of stuff. So we've been doing the show for, I started a podcast that was just my music in 2015 and did that for a little while. And then went away from it, came back in 2018. And then Liz joined the show shortly after that. And we've been doing it every week ever since then. And last April, just as COVID was kicking off, we decided to double the output. So now we do 2 shows a week and still having fun. And yeah, we're just, it's a really fun, creative project to be working on. And it's helped kind of us stay sane through this last year.
Yeah.
It's weird, but kind of cool. Who came up with the idea of adding comedy? Was that you, Liz?
So the project began as a way to get Jason's music out. And then it developed when I started talking sort of in the background to one of the interviews that we were trying to do in an outdoor setting, where I was kind of talking to Jason behind the camera, but then the audience could kind of hear that. They started saying, that's really that's actually a good interaction. You should add some of that. And that's kind of where Miss Elizabeth comes in. But also when Jason first started putting out his music, it felt kind of strange putting just a song on a podcast, which is like we were trying to deliver the music for free. But then putting it out on a podcast is kind of strange without some kind of intro. So Jason felt it was just very natural for him to want to put in some kind of backstory, some kind of background, but something that was sort of fictional and basically something to make you laugh, before. So, and also all of the music is very lighthearted. So everything to do with our project has a very lighthearted and like an uplifting kind of an idea and a feel to it. And so it's very natural to combine that with comedy and also fiction.
So I opposed that every step of the way. I didn't want to talk. I was too shy to do that. Liz finally convinced me that I needed to be talking at least for 2 minutes, and then a few episodes in, I couldn't resist starting to put jokey kinds of things in it. So it wasn't too many episodes until I started telling a longer form story about me getting put on a jury to deal with a case in which a guy went over to his neighbor's yard and smashed up all the mannequins that were in the backyard, because the guy had a big display with mannequins in it that he was very proud of. So I was on the jury for that, and I got bored and I left. I took off on the trial, and then the police were after me. So just like a silly story, but that's really where that started. And then when we came back, we realized we should have a frame for this story. So our town became Smileton. That's the name of our town. And we kind of developed characters from there. So Miss Elizabeth is the very happy, outgoing, positive-minded person, and I'm the crank. I'm the grump. Basically, everybody in the town is doing their own thing and having fun, and everybody's getting along, and I'm the only one who grouses about anything. So it's, everybody went crazy for hot air ballooning in Smileton. So I complain that you can't see the sun on the weekends because the sky is choked with balloons.
You know what? It's kind of interesting because it's almost like when you're a child, you have like this huge imagination, and then you're kind of taught to grow out of it. And it's like you've re-entered that childlike state and just having that imagination run wild. It sounds kind of cool and quite Maverick, quite different.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way before.
Well, there definitely is an innocence to Smileton. Nothing really bad, like there's not really high stakes. Nothing really bad ever happens to Smileton. There's no COVID in Smileton, for example. There's no kind of real world hardships or problems in Smileton. It's very just innocent. Everybody's accepted. Everybody's also very different and kind of has their own quirks or craziness, that they have personality wise. But there's just kind of an acceptance that everything's okay there. No matter what happens, there's conflict, but it's all very low stakes in the sense that nobody's going to get dismembered, for example, things like that.
One of the segments we do is called the Smileton Police Blotter. So the idea is that Liz is listening to the police radio and she's reporting the calls that they respond to, but they're always the most ridiculous. And the thing about being childlike is exactly right. Because one of the ongoing little comedy threads we have happening is that the town is being menaced by an oversized shoes man. So somebody wearing shoes that are too big is just clomping around and making noise. And for some reason, the town is terrified. They can't take the clomping sound, and some people went to track him down, and they got tricked into going into an alley because he left a recording of him clomping around, and they were terrified because they might actually run into the oversized shoes man. So,
thought do you put into this, or do you literally just sit there and start chatting?
There's originally the show was very scripted. There's an intro that Liz does every time. And I actually would write on paper, like, thanks, Miss Elizabeth. Like, I didn't even trust myself to say that properly. And then we just, after you just keep doing it and more repetition. And so it was partly motivated from being just more confident and not needing to do that writing. And also writing that much made preparing the show much more difficult.
Yeah.
So now, like when there's a Smileton police blotter, we'll work together to come up with maybe 5 items, and for these, Liz will read the item out, but the way I respond to it, the way she responds to me, all that's improvised. So we're kind of confident now where we get the concept and we know what the premise is, but we really don't worry about what we're going to do with it. We'll just figure it out on the day. It'll be fine. Like, we trust each other. It'll go well.
So we do. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, we do have storylines, or we do have kind of stories that keep coming back. And so there is a certain amount of planning involved. The Oversized Shoes Man, for example, doesn't have a storyline yet in place. It's just like an element. So we don't know what's going to happen. That's maybe like a little behind the scenes secret. We don't know.
Only he knows.
We don't know what's going to happen with that guy, but there are sometimes longer story arcs that we develop, and we sort of will develop those in segments over time. So there's a certain amount of having to plan that ahead and determine who's going to write what. But then, yeah, when we record it, like Jason said, there's a fair amount of improv, but we do read as well. So it's a combination of both.
Okay, so here's my question for you. So Smarten, is that who you are? And the innocent and childlike nature of it, is that who you are as a couple?
I think we're kind of leaning into certain personality traits that we have. And I think one thing I've learned from, doing music and then working on the show with Liz is that whenever you put something out like this, it is going to reflect who you are, even if it's not on purpose at all. So, I've done songs, like when I first put some music out, I got interviewed by the local paper. And there was a song called The Burgled. And it was called that because I thought the word burgle is funny. And I just did a song where I'm complaining because all my stuff got stolen. And the person interviewing me said, did that happen? Or is that based on anything real? And I said, nah, it's just the word's funny. And I just wrote a song around it. And then later in the interview, it came around that I had been storing musical instruments at my dad's place, and he got broken into and all my instruments got stolen. And the interviewer goes, do you think that might have something to do with why you did that song? And I had never thought of that. So things tie into your life, whether you want to or not. So I'm sure for Smileton, it is a place I would live in. And it is like a wish fulfillment thing, where we're kind of really trying to paint a picture of a place where you can just listen to the show for an hour and you're in a place where everybody's getting along. Everybody's a bit silly. Everybody's got
no different. Well, it's like any TV show out there, isn't it? Except for, if anything, you're going back to the old days that people used to sit in front of the wireless and listen to War of the Worlds or something. It doesn't seem to be that much different.
Yeah.
So I know when Liz approached me to come on the podcast, you were saying, Liz, that you wanted to talk about how character and integrity can have a huge impact on the success of an organisation or project.
Yes.
So now you've teased me, that's what you want to talk to me about. Tell me more.
Yeah. So podcasting is something that a lot of people are doing, and a lot of people think that they want to do it, and many people give it a try. But what we discovered when we got started is that it is, and people say that it's hard, but you don't know how hard it is until you actually get started with podcasting. And I'm sure that you also know this because, your podcast is very steady and very strong, and, you keep coming up with great content. And I feel like you can't do that without having a real a plan, a mission, a determination, but that you can follow that up with some really strong organizational structure, that you put in behind your show, as for example. So just speaking from the perspective of the podcast but extending that to any organization, if you really want to do something like this, that's big like this, that you want to make big, or you want to make real, you want to put out into the world and reach your audience, it takes a kind of organization, and that comes from character. I think it comes from having within you, the desire. That it's meaningful, that it's valuable, and you want to share it. You have a commitment to share that and to presumably improve the world, by sharing it. And so we did a lot of things. We put a lot of things in place to make that happen, including like our Trello organization. So we have a board because we work together. We have to share ideas and keep on our schedule, but we also want to keep the shape of the show intact and keep it flowing in the right way. even when there's bumps and snags along the way, especially if it's not your primary work, for example, then you need to be able to keep that going, even if personal things come in the way. So Jason can talk some about some little bumps that we've had that we were able to get through because of this feeling that it was important, and also this willingness to have organizational structure behind it.
I think the whole character and integrity aspect comes down to, like, it's the organization, and it's also the way you prioritize it. Like, you recognize how much work it's going to be, and you have to leave other things off. You have to leave other things off your to-do list if you're going to do something like this. There have been situations, so we've been doing it for a number of years now. So there have been situations where life events happen, and it becomes challenging to still keep the show going. So you do have to ask yourself, how high a priority is this relative to everything else? So I'll give you an example. A couple years ago, I had been suffering for a while with, like, my heart would race, and I would be just sitting there, but my heart would be pounding, super high heart rate. And I would be getting dizzy, and sometimes I would pass out. And I was writing that off as like a panic attack or anxiety or something like that. And I'd gone through events, like I lost my mom after she was sick for a while. And so I was just kind of ascribing it to that. But finally, I had an incident, though, where I started getting dizzy when I was driving home, and I actually lost vision briefly. I couldn't see. And I was still driving. So I just, take the foot off the gas, keep the car straight until the vision comes back, and then pull over. And I got myself home after I calmed down, and Liz sent me to bed, and I stayed in bed, and I woke up the next morning and my heart was still going. And she said, can we just go to the hospital and get this checked? So I went, and the hospital took it very seriously. Their faces fell when they saw my pulse. So I actually got raced down a hallway, and I got shocked. I got zapped to restart my heart. And then they kept me in critical care for 18 days. So it turns out I had an electrical issue in my heart, which can lead to bad things if you leave it too long. So I was in the hospital for 18 days, and we had a little bit of a buffer for the show. We were a couple weeks ahead, but we ran through that. So even though all that was going on, we weren't sure what was going to happen, it was still important enough for us to do the show. So when I was in my hospital bed, I had a scribbler. So I just scribbled down some ideas. And then Liz called me on the cell phone, and she recorded it, not with our regular setup, but just we're like recording a call on her computer. And we did a short version of the show from the hospital just so that we wouldn't miss that week. So it's the kind of thing where that was a sign to us that we were taking this seriously. This enterprise was important enough to us that we would prioritize it like that. Instead of resting in the hospital, I wasn't worrying about that, my condition, as much as I don't want to miss an episode. So it really is around prioritization, and seeing that sometimes when you have to do things like that, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort and you just have to make it important enough. So in my regular job, I work for an information technology consulting company, and I was sharing kind of how we put the show together with my boss. And he was very interested in sort of the way we plan the show, the way we plan our buffers, the way we plan getting the content done and doing it consistently, because he wants to do that for his company, because he wants to promote on different ways. And maybe the company should have a podcast. So it really showed me that what we're up to here it maps very cleanly onto an organizational structure. Oh, yeah. Like, if you want to get the word out, you have a product or service you're proud of, you think it makes a difference, and you want to engage people in a creative way, it would be something like this, something where it's going to take effort and organization and planning and dedication and love, really.
Yeah, that's true.
Fantastic. So there's so much there, really. So if we go back to this, I guess your illness, I suppose.
Yeah.
That must have been an extremely scary time.
Yeah, like, because the way my brain works really is like, anytime anything like that comes up, I always lean really heavy onto the positive side, where I think it'll be fine. Like, we will we will look back on this and we'll remember what it was like. But I was in critical care. They wouldn't let me out of the room. I was like on a monitor all the time. And at the time, no one was sure what the problem was. So it took 18 days because I had to go through a bunch of tests to narrow down what the problem was. And then when they did eliminate everything else, then they had to plan the treatment. And what they can do now with hearts is amazing. They didn't have to, like, they snaked a wire into me and went into my heart and did some burning to create some scar tissue to break some of these bad electrical connections. So that was interesting because I was wide awake while they were doing it. So now I know what it feels like to have like stuff going on inside your heart, and you can feel it. You can feel when stuff's going on in there.
I also think it was just such a strange moment because Jason's heart had been doing this on and off for really quite a long time. And, when something like this starts happening, when you don't really understand, you just have no idea why your heart's racing. Hearts race for a lot of reasons, so it's hard to then go back and figure out when it started, so it's almost like a bad smell in that way. Like if you're in it, it doesn't really, it's just like normal, So Jason had been going through this and it had just been getting worse and worse, but we didn't think that it was that bad, and until we actually got there. And then we sort of almost were still in disbelief, I think, in the hospital, so I think that's why we were maybe able to keep our calm somewhat. I mean, I certainly lost it a couple of times for sure. But I think that there's a lot of times moments of calm also in the hospital where you're just thinking about what's important in your life, and this is one of those things. This project is one of those things that's just really important and central to us right now. We believe that we're making a difference for other people. So, just grabbing onto that and like holding on to the things that are important and just keep continuing to follow through on them is part of just saying yes to life, really, for us in the hospital, as opposed to giving up. I mean, why, you sort of have those moments where you're asking, why am I even here? What's my purpose? Those kind of essential, really, really deep questions come up, and the way that you answer them, I think is probably very revealing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it poses the question, why are you still doing your podcast? What's its purpose?
Sometimes you do ask that because it's not always easy. And well, it's never easy, but sometimes, like especially if you're wired like me, it sometimes becomes oppressive a little bit where I have to do it. And like, there's a deadline coming up, and it's sort of like, I can't, if I'm not in the mood, that's too bad. We still have to get it done. So I've found that when that kind of mood happens, it's sort of like, that's a sign to just kind of sit down and do it anyway. And you actually, in the act of being creative, you actually turn your mood around. And I think probably that's one of the fundamental things, is that us being creative this way and having a project that's just silly like this and fun, and us sitting down as a married couple to work on something together like this is giving us a lot of benefits. Like, because I know, when we're doing the show together, there have been times when we were learning how to do it, we're improvising, and sometimes we'd step on each other and that kind of thing. And sometimes there'd be a bit of frustration where it's like we each had something we needed to get out, and one person might kind of block the other one unintentionally. And so I think we're proud that we're able to like develop our relationship in this way as well. It's like we can sit down in front of a microphone and like kind of improvise and be funny and do comedy as well as everything else that we're up to.
I think overwhelmingly when we sit down and do the podcast, like in the overwhelming, amount of times, it turns our own moods, it improves our own mood. So it's kind of like, do you want to work out? No, you don't. You don't always want to work out, and actually do the exercise. But when you're doing it and after you're done, you feel great. I find that doing our show, because it's so relentlessly positive and also silly, and it's very deliberately, not looking at the negative. So it's deliberately accentuating the positive in various different ways, like just thematically overall. And it's got the musical attachment as well. And it does that for us personally. So it's great for us personally and as a couple. But we know that it's having an impact on our audience, even if our audience is not huge. We have had results back from our listeners basically saying, please don't stop. And we do have some subscribers who are like, well, we can contribute this, please don't stop doing the show, because when they listen to it, they find that it also seems to improve their day. Some specific feedback that we've got from people.
Yeah, there are people who are like really appreciate it. There's no cynicism in the show. There's no nastiness. There's no, it's all lighthearted and fun. And I think people, when they hear the show, really do respond positively to that. So I think they probably react the same way we do. Like, Smileton's a place we want to be in. And when we're working on the show, we are. So it's escapism and it's fun. And it's also, I think it does influence the way you approach things. Like, because if you see the way people are treating each other, and with that kind of with a light touch and with an open mind and that kind of thing, and maybe that starts spilling out into your life as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you expose yourself to that kind of thing, and I think it does kind of influence how you look at the world. Not in a huge way, but it's like oh yeah, like you kind of get a mindset, and how you feel when you're listening, and maybe you want more of that.
It's a nice little reminder. It's a nice little distraction, and everybody's got big things, big heavy things. They're either that they've been going through. Certainly now with COVID, I think everybody could benefit from just a little bit extra positivity, no matter where it comes from. And that's always been our big why. That's always been our big mission, has been to communicate the subject matter that we have in order to make the world better, really.
That sounds fantastic. So is this something where you live from? I.e., is this where you make most of your money, or do you have paid jobs, or do you run your own business?
Yeah, paid jobs for sure. It's a creative project right now. We do have some supporters, and we do want the show to grow. But basically, I do work full time in information technology, and Liz started so we have 2 kids, and when they started getting a bit older, Liz ended up pursuing consulting from home, where she designs websites for small businesses and does graphic design and social media and all that good stuff. So that's been going for longer than the podcast, or that's been going for more 10 years or more.
I definitely have a really strong client base now. So yeah, that's where most of our money is coming from, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why it becomes a question of priorities for time as well, because people ask, like, how do you have time to do the show twice a week while you're working full time? Yeah. And I don't know. It's just a lot of work. That's
what I was asking, really, to see. And I'm sure people will be listening going, so how does this actually work? So that was what I was interested in. So you kind of explained the importance of purpose in creative projects. What kind of actionable ideas can the audience have which will enable them to succeed in their own creative projects?
Oh, lots. I've learned so much from doing this. Mm-hmm. We mentioned organization before, and I find we use Trello.com, and basically it just lets you create cards effectively and stack them up in columns, and it's like very dynamic to-do lists. So
and shareable,
and it's shareable. So I found the way to get the show put together is to kind of do a top-down thing. So you want to keep your ideas organized and have a way to record them without any fuss. So just if you have an idea, get it down. So you don't want to block. So you want to know exactly where these ideas go. So for me, Trello organizes the show. So like next week, we have 2 episodes. I know what are the comedy segments. I know which songs are going to be in there. And I use Microsoft Cloud, like Word and Excel and that kind of thing, and OneNote to organize the show, to actually do the writing. So I found that you want to do a top-down when you're kind of doing your high level planning. But then when it comes to actually creating, if we have multiple segments in a show, I found it's much easier to break that down and just have, if we're going to do a segment, that segment has its own little place. And I'm not facing a huge blank wall and I have to fill the whole show. I'm just looking at one segment. So that's content so we can talk and joke around for 10 or 15 minutes. So that becomes an easier proposition. And then the top-down idea comes in again, where let's say I'm going to write the Smileton news. So we have a newscast. So so what I do is, well, we have a newscast. So we're going to have there's a template. So I found there's 3 stories up front, and then we do a sports segment where we update the scores from the Smileton Northside Community Street Hockey League. And then we have and finally news story at the end. So I know, okay, 3 ideas up front and then hockey scores and then the end finally. So then I just come up with 1 or 2 sentence descriptions of those. Like, what's the story going to be? Okay, our corrupt mayor has got another project where one of her companies is involved and I'm going to complain about it or something like that. Okay, that's one. And then a few different things. And then I leave it and then come back. And then it's like, well, I got to write the news. Well, I have all the ideas sitting right here. Now I can actually write the text, like the actual news story. So it's being organized, breaking it down, and probably most importantly, like, get out of your own way. But doing music like this, I do like the singing and the writing and all the performing and all that. And Liz joins me on many of the songs. But when I originally was just doing music in the basement by myself, playing along to albums that I liked. And then we had kids and I thought, well, I should be changed. I should be modeling certain behaviors for the kids. So I should be getting out there and meeting people and sharing, music with people. And I tried to get into a band, it didn't get in, but the person I was up against had a bass playing buddy. So that was it. So I couldn't top that. But when I saw how those bands worked and the people involved, I thought, well, I can do that. I should just set up my own thing. And I thought, well, okay, setting these things up is a ton of work. And it's hard to get a group of people, like find them and have everybody equally committed and equally available. So to start, it should just be me. Well, if that's the case, oh boy, well, then I'm going to have to sing, but I don't sing. Well, I guess you need lessons. So then I went and got singing lessons for 2 years. So it's just...
Wow, that's such a commitment. You've obviously said, this is what I'm doing, and you've gone all out to make it happen, which is, sadly in this day and age, quite a maverick thing to do, is actually say, I'm going to make a commitment to myself, I'm going to do this. I don't have the skills, so I'm just going to learn them. So I think that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. I think this is probably a great place to end, unless there's one thing that you want to mention that you didn't have a chance to mention.
The main thing I've learned from this is I would really recommend for people to, if they don't have a creative outlet, to try to find one. And it doesn't have to be anything, like, it doesn't have to be majorly ambitious in scope, but just having the project where you're expressing yourself and you're learning skills and it's all under your control, what you're up to. And I find it's a very powerful way to enrich your life. It's hard for me to see what we would be doing if we stopped doing it, to stop doing the show. I think find something and do it.
Yeah. And as an extremely simple start, just start. If you're not doing anything, if you don't have an idea what to do or how, or you want to see, experiment with what that'll do for you, just start journaling. Just start writing. You'll learn so much just from starting to do that creative process. Just the act of starting to create will show you what kind of content you think that you have, and actually what content you actually have to bring out into the world. And it really develops as you're creating it. So it's not like it's inside you. It'll come out. It'll actually develop as in the process of creating it. So it's I would definitely say I agree with Jason. Everybody should try to do something, no matter how small, creatively. I think that it definitely will improve your life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been really good to hear about Smileton and how you can find your creative outlet.
You should go to thesmilesyndicate.com. Everything is there, and including all of our social media and everything, and subscribe to the show on all podcasting providers. Of course, choose the one that you like. You don't have to subscribe to all of them on all the different apps.
Oh, that would help.
Cool. Thank you for coming.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for having us.
It's been a real pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Liz and Jason as much as I enjoyed having it. At the Maverick Paradox, we improve your impact and influence by enabling you to effectively strategize, innovate, and execute. To find out more, contact us at judith@maverickparadox.com. Thank you.
If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. Finally, if you would like to work with us or are interested in the Maverick at work, check out maverickparadox.co.uk.